identical. Those would be pretty much the same function. Where we do start to see some differences are in the unfair labor practice space. The actual unfair labor practices are nearly identical. I guess I should stop for a moment and just explain that. Neither of these acts create all of the guidelines for what has to be in a contract. What they do is set the way the parties have to function together. So an unfair labor practice isn't about what you put in the contract. It's about whether or not you are bargaining in good faith, where you're discriminating against workers trying to form a union, where you're doing these types of things. They set the framework for how workers have the right to collective bargaining. They don't set what has to be done in the process. So the unfair labor practices don't deal with proposals. They deal with how the parties are interacting, if that makes sense. And it protects the right of the individual workers to form the union, and there are rights for the individual workers both against unfair labor practices committed by a labor organization, which we commonly refer to as a union, but a labor organization or an employer. So it's really about protecting the individual's rights to come together and collectively bargain with their employers. So when I say unfair labor practice, we get calls on that like, hey, they're being unfair. That's not what the law protects. The law protects for you from discrimination, retaliation. It protects your right to join a union. It protects your right to not join a union. So that's what unfair labor practices cover. So those are nearly identical in both laws, but what is very different is that the NLRB treats their act as a regulatory act, much like you would see from like our minimum wage or something, where if I file a complaint that there's an unfair labor practice, they do the investigation, they will reach conclusions, and they will enter into litigation if they have to effectuate the act. Under our law, we don't do that. What happens if a worker has an unfair labor practice, or a labor organization or an employer, is they file the unfair labor practice, but they immediately go to hearing. So they go to an administrative law judge immediately, and then each party has to present their case. The administrative law judge makes a decision, et cetera, et cetera. And I jumped ahead, but that's all of that right there. Those few words are exactly what I'm talking about. So that is a challenge. I think it's good and bad. What it does is it sort of expedites the process to get to a hearing where the NLRB might take longer. The not so good part for the individual worker is they're kind of standing there by themselves to try to present a case, which may be against a bunch of lawyers, a big corporation, it could be whatever. So because we don't investigate, literally, if I'm an individual worker with an unfair labor practice without a union, without a labor organization, I'm going to be in that hearing pretty much by myself. And that, that's going to create some challenges for those workers to pursue their claims. In the mediation space, though, that Labor Management Act does cover private sector mediation. So we didn't lose jurisdiction in the private sector, but because of the Federal Mediation Service, we haven't been in that space a lot. So we are available, and I think that's important to note, because what we saw in the news recently is that the Federal Mediation Conciliation Service has in essence been eliminated. And those are the mediators that would have been working with groups, big or small, but like most recently with the UAW strike, those federal mediators are going to be the ones that are in that room trying to get the parties to an agreement. Those federal mediators would be the ones in the room with the UPS and Teamsters trying to get to an agreement. That's in essence been eliminated. So that will fall to our mediators to pick up that space. Certainly we have mediators available, but it's going to be a broader scale in the private sector than we've been participating in. Most of our mediators focus in on public employment relations. Public Employment Relations Act is a side by side. They kind of interact with each other as it relates to commission and mediation, but that's where our mediators spend most of their time across the state of Michigan. So that's going to be important, because one of the goals of both of these laws is to avoid strikes. It's to help the parties reach an agreement. It's to help the parties get to a conclusion that doesn't impact commerce and doesn't interfere with workers' rights and workplace operations. So our mediators will be available to do that. One of the challenges we will have, though, is that under the National Labor Relations Act, there are procedures for the building trades in particular to deal with jurisdictional disputes over whose work is what, so that we avoid work stoppages that way as well. We don't have that in our law. So if something changes at the national level on that, we don't have a backstop for that. So what happened and why that's there traditionally is that workers would walk off the job and that's why we have things like union security clauses and otherwise, because workers would walk off the job, and we don't want those types of things because they impact commerce, right? For mediation or otherwise, both statutes and the National Labor Relations Act and ours do require a notice of bargaining, so our mediators are aware that bargaining is happening. They do check in. They are available if the parties want to use them, and we try to work with parties to make sure that we get through those. So in our Bureau of Operations, just a real quick kind of highlight here, it exists because MERC exists, right? So we have 3 commissioners appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. They have to have extensive labor law experience and collective bargaining experience because we want consistent decisions. When I file an unfair labor practice, the administrative law judge will make a conclusion, and that will go to the board for evaluation. They can agree, they can change it, they can modify it, they can reject it and write their own opinion, they can do different things. And the point of that board is to have, and the same as the National Labor Relations Board traditionally, is to have consistent outcomes from different types of unfair labor practices so the parties are aware of what they can and cannot do as they're working through this relationship. As I mentioned, we assist people through the mediation process. We do that quite well and quite often, and that's set up in a mediation division. So when we look at the Bureau of Employment Relations, there's sort of this mediation function and the labor relations function. Most of the staff at the Bureau of Employment Relations are mediators, but we do have several in the labor relations. That labor relations staff works with the commissioners to research, write opinions, all of the things that go along with being consistent. And then we handle all petitions, whether it's an unfair labor practice, a representation petition, a decertification petition, you name it. Those all come through the Bureau of Employment Relations to work through the processes and remedy those. So pretty much every year, but we had about 2,100 new case initiations. Many of those are representation petitions, but we have a lot of unfair labor practices too. We went through a voluntary mediation program that went virtual, and where for grievances and collective bargaining agreements has been very, very well received to help parties, because you don't always need to wait quite a long time to see an ALJ to resolve these issues. In 2022, the Commission worked diligently to eliminate any backlog they had on cases, because some of them were taken to file. We got e-filing. We're involved in labor and industrial relations committees, communities, you name it, across the state of Michigan, and just trying to continue to bolster sort of industrial harmony, as it was traditionally called, but trying to ensure that workers and employers understand their rights and obligations under the law, but it's also on how to interact with each other as they move forward. I have a tendency to just stop. I don't. Okay. I don't have, yeah.
You threw me there for a second, Sean.
A lot of words. I'm done.
Gotcha. You were going quickly, and then all of a sudden, boom. All right. I'm going to start out with a question, and members, if you have questions, I'll take questions as well. But you mentioned that it looks like, as of now, mediation services at the federal level are essentially no longer available. I guess this is a two-part question. Number one, in the event of a strike or negotiations that aren't going well, typically, if we think of a UAW contract now, this is a multi-state, multinational corporations, multi-state union. Can we provide service for these types of labor and management disagreements? And then second, beyond like jurisdictional, what level of capacity do we have to be able to provide service?
Yeah, I think our mediators are busy. In Michigan, about half of the public sector workers are union. That's a lot of contracts. We think of unions all the time as like these big giant things, but most of them are quite small. I mean, in our community, the 8 people at the DPW in Lowell are part of a union. The 8 people over at Lowell Light and Power are part of a union, right? So you have these different scopes of unions. So the mediators are quite busy facilitating negotiations across the public space. We have posted recently for 2 additional mediators, even before what we saw from FMCS, we were kind of moving in that direction. We are expanding our scope into the private sector to be helpful. Obviously, we have to do that faster now. So we feel like in the short run, we're probably okay on capacity to support that, but I think we will probably, unfortunately, we won't know if we don't have capacity until we don't have capacity, right? So when you have one of these mega potential strikes that could cover multiple states, it could become more challenging. And I think that on the jurisdictional question, that is theoretically the parties can say, hey, we want to, you know, if I'm a mediator, hey, Sean, we want to use you, even though this is a multi-state agreement. But that probably works for like the UAW and GM, but it probably doesn't work for the Teamsters and UPS, right? Because they're not headquartered here. They're not, this isn't where they're at. Well, I guess many of the Teamsters are, but so I think that we could have some challenges where we could have mediators available in part, but maybe not the whole. So we would have to try to coordinate with other similar state agencies. We're not the only law that has sort of these other procedures, right? So we might have to coordinate with other state agencies. I think what we're seeing already is sort of a private sector mediator function developing with many of these FMCS mediators that are no longer employed. They're setting up their own mediation services. That's good and bad. The good is that there's still going to be mediators available. The difficult part is that you're going to lose consistency because they just become whatever, right? And with one of the major points of having our own mediators and the FMCS mediators is just consistent neutrality, that they're not tied to the next client that picks them up. They're always neutral, right? So you could see some different situations develop there.
Okay. Members' question, yeah, Senator Albert.
Thank you, and I appreciate this presentation. Kind of along that question along those same lines, I'm just trying to understand, especially with the, you know, the interstate nature of a lot of these large corporations, how that, if there's a dispute, how that gets ironed out if it does cross state lines. And I'm thinking of like a high-profile one we could think of was when the UAW went on strike with the big three automakers, and I mean that crossed.
They're all over the place.
That crossed. I mean, there was places that were, I guess they went on strike in different areas throughout the whole country. Yeah. How does that work? Is there, because that's, you know, each state, I guess it would be too fractured to try to figure that out. Was there like a national board that somehow had precedent in that type of
Yes, so that Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service is just federal mediators. So, you know, you watch movies and it's like, they're calling in the federal mediator. So these folks are out of an organization that was in Washington, D.C. There was probably, I don't know, 400 across the country. And traditionally, those would be the mediators that would handle those multi-state. They're required in the National Labor Relations Act, which governs collective bargaining rights in the private sector across the country, to notify them of pending disputes, lockouts, strikes, all that kind of stuff. So those mediators would engage there. I think what we're thinking about, or what we're looking toward, is what do we do without them? Because they just got eliminated at the federal level. So if that multi-state strike happens, we don't have those mediators available now to go in and work with the employers and those labor organizations to sort of solve the issues. So it does become a sort of a fractured who's available, what can they do situation. And inevitably, you would presume it will prolong strikes because you won't have that neutral third party there trying to pull the parties together, trying to help them work through issues. Having negotiated a lot of contracts myself, I can tell you that they can break down and communication gets really hard. Where a mediator is extremely valuable is just keeping everybody talking, keeping them moving on different issues, because you can get locked into like, we need this one thing, and maybe you do and maybe you don't, but the mediator helps the parties kind of massage it or work around it, or at least continue talking. So where we do see longer strikes, traditionally and even in the past few years, is when the parties stop communicating. So this is going to create more of a challenge moving forward.
Have we looked at, you know, when contracts, like what is the timeline on contracts that are, of which there are many Michigan employees that are working under, when those are due to expire in the next few years?
No, we have not. I mean, we certainly can to the extent they're publicly available. There's no obligation for them to provide those with those. So we can ask, but if they say no, there's not a lot we could do there, but we can certainly try to check that out, especially at a larger scale. And I do like that point, and I appreciate it.
Do you know, you said they had 400 mediators across the country. Do we know how many were based out of Michigan or Midwest area?
So Michigan was 7. I think we had 4 in Detroit, 1 in 6, one that covered the UP in northern Michigan. And then that one in the UP covered part of Wisconsin. So across the Midwest, there were probably about 60 if you went sort of Wisconsin, Illinois, around to Pennsylvania.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Other questions, members? All right, thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation.
You didn't fall asleep. I appreciate it. It's very complex and long stuff, so thank you for your time.
Next, we're going to have some testimony from displaced federal workers. I'll call individuals up one by one. I'd like to invite Nicole Rice up to testify. Nicole most recently served as the NOAA Great Lakes Environmental Research at the NOAA Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory in Ann Arbor as a communications specialist. And she began her federal career with the Department of Defense, developing troop support programs for the Stars and Stripes newspaper. And welcome to the Senate Labor Committee, and please feel free to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and members of the committee. I would like to also thank the Department of Labor for being here today. I'm a member of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 3908. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Michigan is home to nearly 30,000 federal employees, including 6,371 in Washtenaw County, where I live. These workers support essential services and protect our public safety and national resources through agencies such as NOAA, the EPA, USGS, the VA, the IRS, HUD, and the Department of Homeland Security. These are your neighbors, your friends, and constituents who get up every day to serve their country and their communities. They are scientists, engineers, public service, veterans, and working families who contribute to our local economies and help uphold the stability of the nation. These federal jobs don't just represent paychecks, they represent public value. They safeguard our environment, ensure accurate weather forecasting, protect our food supply, and support emergency response. When these employees are silenced or fired, when their missions are derailed, Michigan suffers. On February 27th, I left a doctor's appointment and was met via email with devastating news. I was terminated from my federal position at NOAA with less than 90 minutes notice after 13 years of federal service, 10 of which I spent at NOAA. The reason given, according to the email I received, was, quote, guidance from the Office of Personnel Management states, an appointment is not final until the probationary period is over, and the probationary period is, quote, part of the hiring process for employees. A probationer is still an applicant for a finalized appointment to a particular position as well as federal service. It goes on to read, until probationary period has been completed, a probationer has the burden to demonstrate why it is in the public interest for the government to finalize an appointment to the civil service for this particular individual. OPM has advised probationary periods are an essential tool for agencies to assess employee performance and manage staffing levels. Lastly, in light of that guidance, the agency finds that you are not fit for continued employment because your ability, knowledge, and or skills do not fit the agency's current needs. Excuse me. The actual reason that I had recently received a promotion based on my excellent performance. Due to my disability and being promoted under Schedule A hiring authority, which is the federal government program for hiring folks with disabilities into the civil service jobs, I was placed into a 2-year probationary period that left me vulnerable to the current administration's wave of politically motivated firings. In a memo originally published on January the 20th and updated on March the 4th, after the majority of the probationary firings took place, OPM updated their guidance to read, quote, "Probationary periods are an essential tool for agencies to assess employee performance and ensure that a probationer's conduct and performance have established the individual will be an asset to the government," end quote. I ask you to listen to this part closely. It continues, "Employees on probationary periods can be terminated during that period without triggering appeal rights to the Merit Systems Protection Board, MSBP. Generally, employees in the competitive service with less than 1 year of service and the accepted service with less than 2 years of service can be terminated without triggering MSPB appeal rights," end quote. This updated language shows that my termination was demonstrably wrongful and that I was simply an easy target who seemingly lacks the right to appeal. After being fired, my access to health care quickly vanished, and with no information provided on how to secure interim coverage. I wasn't given the paperwork required to file for unemployment. My income, my health care, and my dignity were stripped away without warning and without cause. As a disabled person, this has left me vulnerable to debt, illness, or worse, and I'm not alone. Hundreds of my colleagues, many of whom are disabled or veterans, have been similarly dismissed. Due to ongoing litigation, many of us who were dismissed were reinstated, only to be dismissed again. The whirlwind of joblessness, unknown status, lack of communication, not to mention the influx of media and social media describing civil servants as, quote, "government waste, bureaucrats, and frauds, and worse," have taken a toll on our mental health and well-being. And while states like Maryland are stepping up to support those impacted workers, we've heard very little from Michigan's leadership, and we deserve better. Excuse me. The termination of employees is just one piece of a broader, devastating dismantling of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The agency faces a proposed 27% budget cut, a reduction of over $1.6 billion. More than 1,700 NOAA positions are being eliminated, including scientists, oceanographers, meteorologists, and technical experts whose work underpins everything from hurricane warnings to commercial fisheries. 700 employees have already been wrongfully terminated, and another 1,029 face imminent removal. These cuts are not just bureaucratic, they're dangerous. NOAA's hurricane hunters, storm forecasters, and satellite analysts provide early warnings that save lives. When these services are delayed or disrupted, people die. We are already seeing severe staffing shortages at the National Weather Service, termination of hurricane hunters, suspension of Spanish language weather alerts, gaps in weather radio coverage during tornadoes and floods, and a crippling delay in satellite maintenance that affects nationwide forecasts. These threats are not hypothetical. They're happening right now. And they're already raising insurance costs, hurting farmers and fishers, and threatening public safety across the United States. Closer to home, I want to highlight the very specific and very serious impacts these cuts are having on the Great Lakes region through the targeted dismantling of NOAA's Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory, my former workplace, based in Ann Arbor and Muskegon. GLERL is NOAA's only regional center focused on the Great Lakes. Since February, more than 35% of its staff have been lost due to illegal firings and encouraged resignations. Essential functions have been crippled. Its director, key scientists, and the entire communications team have been eliminated. A federal firing freeze means none of these roles can be filled. And it's not just people. We are losing capacity. NOAA has halted contract approvals, delayed vessel deployments, and cut funding for basic field work. That means no algal bloom monitoring, no shoreline mapping, no new data for forecasts, and no shipwreck buoys for divers in our marine sanctuaries. The President's budget for FY26 proposes to eliminate GLERL entirely by dissolving NOAA's research office. That would end GLERL's operations, partnerships, and mission. This lab's work is not duplicated anywhere else. Its loss would be an enormous blow to drinking water safety, climate resilience, maritime safety, invasive species control, and international treaty compliance with Canada. The lab is not replaceable. Eliminating this lab would result in no more forecasts for toxic algal blooms, no more real-time models for Coast Guard rescue missions, a shutdown of science that protects $6 billion Great Lakes fishery, end of support for binational water agreements with Canada, loss of vital data needed for weather predictions, drinking water safety, and economic development in this region. Let me put this in terms to the value to the American people. The Great Lakes are among the United States' greatest natural treasures, strengthening our economy and attracting millions of visitors each year. The lakes provide drinking water to over 30 million people, generate clean hydropower, and generate $3.1 trillion in gross domestic product. NOAA's Great Lakes Lab costs about 7 cents per American household per year. Eliminating its parent office, NOAA's Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, would save just over $3 per taxpayer, while undermining public safety, economic prosperity, and environmental stewardship across the Great Lakes and the country. The impacts of these cuts are not abstract. They will be felt directly by the American people. While GLERL's expertise and data, without GLERL's expertise and data, beach forecasts will lag or disappear entirely, leaving the public unaware of dangerous conditions such as rip currents, E. coli outbreaks, or harmful algal blooms. The U.S. Coast Guard will lose access to critical wind, wave, and ice forecasts, slowing down life-saving search and rescue operations. We also face potential delays in toxin forecasting, which was developed at GLERL after the 2014 Toledo water crisis, when toxic algal blooms left over 400,000 residents without drinking water and cost the city upward of $65 million. And if NOAA can no longer lead invasive species research and forecasting, we risk invasive carp becoming established in the Great Lakes, which would devastate commercial and recreational fishing. Imagine a future without Lake Superior whitefish or Lake Michigan yellow perch. A blow not only to our culinary heritage, but to an industry that supports tens of thousands of jobs. It has taken over a century of bipartisan cooperation, investment, and science to bring the Great Lakes back from the brink of ecological collapse. But these reckless cuts could undo the progress in just a few short years, endangering the largest surface freshwater system in the world. I have in my hand today letters from 6 key organizations in the Great Lakes region, cities of Toledo and Cleveland, the Lake Carriers Association, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the Great Lakes Observing System. In each letter, these organizations emphasize without hesitation the critical importance of sustaining NOAA's research efforts in the Great Lakes. Their messages are clear. This work is not optional. It's essential to public safety, economic vitality, and environmental stewardship. In short, NOAA GLERL is indispensable, and Michigan should be leading the fight to save it. In closing, Michigan cannot afford to stand by in silence. As someone who served the public with pride, as someone who was not fired for wrongdoing, but for doing good work, I'm here to ask for your leadership. Speak out for the 30,000 federal employees in Michigan, push back against defunding of NOAA and the destruction of GLERL, defend science, public safety, and environmental protection in our state. This is not just about jobs, it's about standing up for integrity and public service, for the security of our communities, and for the future of our Great Lakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very sorry for the personal difficulty that you and I'm sure your family have been facing. And thank you for the work that you've done for the people of the United States in Michigan. Members, do you have questions? Senator Camilleri?
I mean, less of a question and just more, a thank you for speaking out and for pushing back, because I know it must not be easy to be in a position where you were fired for no reason but for doing your job, and then using that opportunity to lift up your voice and advocate on behalf of the 30,000 workers that you just mentioned, and the work that you did on behalf of this country is brave. It's very brave, it's very courageous, and thank you for standing up for workers and for science. I mean, the things that you outlined directly impact our residents every single day. My district starts from parts of the Detroit River into Lake Erie, and we talk about the algae blooms all the time because it is something that affects our life and the people who want to use the Great Lakes to our benefit. The fact that type of research will be impacted, and then you look at some of the storms that we face every day, especially during storm season where we've had tornadoes and flooding, especially in places like Metro Detroit. We just had a massive ice storm up north. Those impacts are directly going to see a further eroding of assistance because of these impacts. So we're in for really tough times, and the fact that you are lifting this up today is critical. So thank you. And I really just want to, ask, what more should we be doing? What else do you want to see from elected officials? Because we're not federal officials, obviously, but these types of attacks and this rhetoric is making its way here to Michigan, where they're talking about making cuts from the House Republican side of things in this legislature to continue those types of attacks because they don't believe in some of these programs, even though there are clear reasons why these programs are critical. So help us, avoid some of those cuts here at the state level as well. And what advice do you have for us, and what do you want to see out of your elected officials?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, it's hard to combat the rhetoric, obviously. I think just lifting voices of folks like myself, making sure that the stories are being told within the communities in Michigan. As I mentioned in my testimony, we're your neighbors, we're your friends, our kids go to your schools, we volunteer in your communities. But in addition to that, I think, Governor Westmore has really taken a lead. Obviously he has probably hundreds of thousands of federal employees in his state. He's really taken the lead to build a program for these displaced federal employees, from job services, having job fairs, building capacity at the state level to take on some of these federal positions and take on some of this. So, just off the top of my head, Eagle will probably have to take on some of these monitoring issues and things like that the federal government would have typically done. But then also just the support from, the mental health aspect, the healthcare aspect, things like that. Like I said in my testimony, we were left scrambling for information. Thankfully, there's a large group of us who have started to work together to find out information. When we send emails and when we make phone calls to the Department of Commerce, they don't get returned. We get to voicemail boxes, things like that, because it's just a nightmare up there. So just from the state level, somehow building capacity to take on these federal employees. We have very specific skill sets that could be used in our communities. And then again, lifting the voices of those of us who have been impacted by this and telling that story.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. I just kind of wanted to follow that with just comments and also thanking you for, I think you being here today and telling your story is exactly how you tell us what to do. And also I want to be very critical of what the Senator just mentioned as we talk about the budget season, as we talk about the House Republicans presenting a budget, and also potentially continuing that harmful rhetoric of our vital workers that are doing some really great things in the state, and making sure that our programs are running effectively and efficiently throughout the state so people can see and realize those programs. Just take a really close look of when the Senate comes out and make sure that we are capturing and also doing what the state needs to do of just seeing some illegal stuff. And also just treatment of humans. And so we're really going to try and chair of 3 budgets, including the labor of economic opportunity. I just want to say I hear you and I see you, and I'd love to figure out how we can be supportive at the state to be a capture for our residents and just to let you know that you aren't alone. So I just appreciate you being here and really just take a look and also advocate for, if people are losing programs or losing their jobs, to reach out to their local elected officials. Let us know so we can be that standing ground and make sure that you have just someone in your corner. So I appreciate you being here and thank you for the time, Chair.
Thank you, Senator. As Senator Camilleri had mentioned, and I'm sure you're well aware, in Michigan we've had some significant extreme weather over the past month that's impacting a lot of folks. Can you talk about what NOAA's role is in terms of making sure we're prepared to deal with weather issues and what impacts you may see?
Sure. Specifically as it goes to the laboratory that I was working for, the Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory, what our researchers do is look at things like how the lakes affect weather patterns. With the world's largest freshwater system in the world, weather patterns can be a little bit different, climate patterns can be different. So what our researchers do is understand the lake dynamics as they feed into weather dynamics. So we work very closely with the National Weather Service to update forecast models. Our models feed into theirs and their models feed into ours. Without that research ongoing, those weather models, as things shift in the climate, those weather models will, for lack of a better term, get weaker and weaker. We need to have those models updated, constantly. So eliminating a research office in the Great Lakes is detrimental to being able to predict things like those big ice storms or being able to predict lake effect snow. We are advancing lake effect snow forecasting to the point where we can, pretty easily determine now where that lake effect snow is going to hit and when. So, continuing to research those types of events here in the Great Lakes is imperative to the safety and to, economic development so that we can better predict where certain areas may need to see a little additional resilience. Back in the 40s, everybody built a house on the lakes. It's beautiful, right? We have shifting weather patterns that are now eroding the cliffs and eroding certain areas. We have higher highs and lower lows. So we're seeing, extreme levels within marinas and other structures and weather events that, can happen very quickly. And our laboratory is working to research those weather events. I don't know if you've ever heard the term meteo tsunamis, but it's a weather event that comes across and treats the water as it would in a tsunami, which would be, caused by a volcano or an earthquake. Here in the Great Lakes, it's caused by weather pressure systems. So understanding that and understanding where those waves may go, what typically happens is a weather system will come through and it will build that wave. It'll be a bright sunny day after that weather system goes through. We've all been on the beach when a storm comes through and then the sun comes back out. Well, that wave is still out there. So saving lives by understanding that wave may still be out there and potentially providing warnings. We have a buoy system now that's the first of its kind. For the last 2 years, we've put out buoys that are able to predict shifts in water levels so that if there's a large enough shift, we'll get a warning. Without those researchers and without that laboratory, all of those programs go away. So we're really talking about the safety and welfare of Michiganders and people in the Great Lakes.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate your testimony in coming here today. So
Thank you.
next, we have two other individuals. First, I'd like to invite up Leslie Desmond, who's a financial analyst with the Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Office of Public Housing, where she oversaw the risk portfolio for public housing and housing choice vouchers for the state of Michigan. Leslie, welcome, and please proceed.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Senators Cherry, Kavanaugh, Camerly, and Senator Albert. I appreciate your time to listen to me testify today. My name is Leslie Desmond. I'm a mother of two from Dearborn. I grew up downriver. I spend my free time all seasons up in Higgins Lake, and I'm a federal employee. I have served as a financial analyst for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Office of Public Housing. I left a lucrative career in the private sector because I care deeply about the affordability and access of housing in Michigan. In February, I was illegally fired by an unsigned, unaddressed email. In March, there was a court order to reinstate my position. I've been put on administrative leave in purposeful noncompliance with the judge's order. I received an email, which I will quote. Reinstatement to HUD employment will remain in place until there is a decision in the case which does not require HUD to maintain your reinstatement. Which to me reads, as I'm on administrative leave until the current administration figures out a way to legally fire me. These past few months have caused me unnecessary turmoil and stress. I've lost paychecks. I've started bartending to feed my kids. I've taken loans from family members, and I worry about losing my house that I've worked so hard for. My 2 sons have asthma, and I've had to pay out of pocket to make sure that they have the health care that they need. I have an MBA from the University of Detroit Mercy, and I have an in-demand skill set in quantitative finance. And I've chosen to serve my country and to serve Michiganders and to help our most vulnerable populations in our state have access to safe and affordable housing. Now, I stress about whether I can maintain the quality of life that used to be the power of our middle class. I wonder what will happen as many more people have the same story that I do. And they won't have the services there to assist them. In addition to being chaotic, these fires have been inefficient, wasteful, and without purpose. My job is all about financial responsibility and risk management. My job is to make sure that federal dollars are spent responsibly. My job is the first line in finding fraud, misuse, abuse, and waste of government funding. I review audits, budgets, and ensure financial compliance for public housing agencies in the state of Michigan. I'm going to pause and go back to that chaos. I'm using the word chaotic because it is hard to plan, it is hard to budget, and it is hard to make sure that anything can be planned for the future when there is chaos. The current broad cuts at the federal level have made our government less efficient at serving our taxpayers. How is it efficient to fire workers and then pay them to sit idly while they're on administrative leave? This is an insult to not only federal civil servants, but to the American taxpayer whose money is being wasted and who are being lied to. In February of this year, in the middle of a cold Michigan winter, 2 children died while sleeping in a car in Detroit. Their mother had called and had asked for emergency relief, had went through the right channels looking for help. But because of chaotic government cuts and of inefficiencies, we failed them. Improving government is about working together with people who understand federal programs and to make sure that these programs work for the people they serve. As you continue your discussion about government inefficiency, I implore you to consider the allocation of sufficient resources to make sure that children don't have to sleep in cars. As a mom, my heart breaks for this family, and I don't want any other Michiganders to have to suffer. As a federal worker who works in public housing, I know that we can do better, but all of our public housing agencies are waiting on the budget authority from the federal level. And the answer is not through these thoughtless cuts. As we look at inefficiencies on the federal level, we need to ensure that Michiganders are being served. Currently, in the entire state of Michigan, there is only a leasing potential of 106 housing choice vouchers. I'm sorry, that's 206. MISHDA, our state's largest housing choice voucher program, has over 28,000 people on their waiting list to access these vouchers. I'm asking you to allow us to continue to do the job that has already been budgeted for. These unthought out firings and massive cuts are an attack on all Americans. The current attacks on federal workers and the programs that are already causing instability, not only in our housing availability, but in our communities. And what's worse is that it's being done in the name of efficiency, when what is happening is actually being done in the name of cruelty, under the guise of financial responsibility. I urge Michigan lawmakers to stand up and let everyone know that you believe in a federal and state government that serves its people, not just billionaires. I stand in solidarity with my fellow federal civil workers and my fellow members of the American Federation of Government Employees. We will keep fighting to do our jobs protecting the Constitution of the United States of America and to serve the American people. I'm a proud union worker. I'm a daughter of a UAW member, and I support all our union workers in our great state of Michigan. I hope that you guys will stand with me too in service to all Michiganders. And thank you for giving me the time to speak today.
Thank you, Leslie. And again, I'm sorry for the difficulty that you and your family are going through. And I appreciate you highlighting the fact that the work that civil servants do has impact, and sometimes very significant impacts, on the people of the United States, people of the state of Michigan. I remember reading the article about the children who were sleeping in the car at the Detroit casino and lost their lives, and it was just absolutely heartbreaking. It continues to be heartbreaking. The work that you have done is meaningful, so thank you. Members, questions for Leslie? Thank you very much. Oh, okay, sorry.
Just quickly.
Yeah.
So thank you again for testifying, and similarly, it is very brave to get up here and to speak out against these types of cuts and speak out against an administration that is prioritizing billionaires over regular workers. So thank you for doing that. I'm thinking a little bit about the rest of your colleagues too. What have you gathered from information from some of your colleagues who've been fired? What are they saying? Is it all in alignment? Is anybody being targeted based on their speech? What are the things that you're hearing in addition to just these random cuts that are happening?
Since January, there has been a very large focus on ensuring that political alignments are happening, which I want to point out shouldn't be the case. Our federal service is bipartisan. Our federal service is to serve the people. And there has been a full-scale essentially change management project over certain words in programming. So a lot of agencies have been working to scramble to cut words out of their grants. And I was actually just speaking with a friend in Ohio who an entire youth homeless outreach had been cut because of a certain word on an agency's profile on the internet. This attack on words is scary to watch in real time. And it's also provides fear for workers in the fear that they could be sent before a committee and terminated by using words that we don't even know, because will be in quotation of DEI wokeness. And I'm not sure what those words are when I'm just trying to ensure financial compliance over housing. It makes it hard. Like, so is woman a word that I shouldn't be using? Like, does that mean that the Violence Against Women Act shouldn't be enforced? It makes it a very tumultuous workplace. And at the end of the day, all of the people that I work with just want people to have access to safe, affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite up Andrew Lennox, who is Administrative Officer in the Primary Care Division at the VA Medical Center in Ann Arbor. In his role, he makes sure that nearly 100 doctors can focus on caring for 3,000 veterans by handling the pay issues, performance evaluations, credentialing, and other items. Andrew is a veteran of the Marine Corps, where he served for 10 years. Andrew, welcome to the Senate Labor Committee.
Morning. I'd like to thank the committee for allowing us the opportunity to speak today. And it means a lot to have this platform, know that people that are representing us are truly concerned about what's happening. To explain my experience, my background, I'm a recently reinstated federal employee. I was illegally terminated at the direction of the Office of Personnel Management, February 13th, 2025. And, I want to be clear, as an employee, my words and opinions right now do not reflect the official policies of the Department of Veterans Affairs. But what my words and statements are going to reflect is the experience of a terminated federal employee and a Marine Corps veteran who spent 10 years serving this country in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and then recruiting the next generation of Marines in the Metro Detroit area. This is where I grew up, and this is what I care about. And on that note, I would like to extend a hurrah to Senator Albert, fellow jarhead. So how did I get here? I joined the Marines after teaching kindergarten in Egypt during the Arab Spring. I watched Egyptians take to the streets and clash with security forces, some of them dying in the streets, for a chance at a democratic voice in their future, in their children's future. It reinforced a belief that democracy can only survive if there are those willing to defend it. And for everything that we enjoy in this country, I believe that it was only right that I give something back. So I finished the year at that school. I resigned my job, and I hopped on a plane to Detroit and enlisted in the Marines. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. It introduced me to a true cross-section of America, representing people from, honestly, across the world, socioeconomic, race, religion. It was an amazing, amazing experience. And the things that resonated with us are our core values, because in Marine Corps boot camp, so I'm an enlisted man, each night is spent scrubbing the floors on your hands and knees, banging a wooden scrub brush against the concrete floor, screaming honor, courage, commitment at our drill instructors' commands until our voices are hoarse and those values of honor, courage, commitment are tattooed on our souls. The guiding principles of everything that we do as Marines in and out of uniform. When I left the Marines after 10 years of service, I felt the same feeling of isolation that a lot of veterans experience. Because in the military, you're surrounded by a platoon of people who understand you. They have your back. They understand your purpose because they share that purpose. And once you walk off that base for the last time, though, that sense of connection, it disappears. Suddenly, you're alone. You're without your tribe and without the identity that defined you for so long. And I tried, the private sector. I worked in different industries, but I still couldn't find that sense of belonging in the civilian world that I had in the military until I stepped into a VA hospital for the first time. A Vietnam Army vet saw my Marine Corps keychain, slapped me on the back, and called me a jarhead. And I knew I was home again. I found my tribe. So that is when, in December 2024, after a 6-month onboarding process, I began my work at the VA Medical Center in Ann Arbor, where I served as the administrative officer for the primary care division. I wasn't kicking in doors anymore as a grunt. I was what we called a keyboard warrior. But I loved it because my job now, my mission was supporting our service members. But this time it was making sure that our nearly 100 doctors could focus on caring for 3,000 patients, 3,000 veteran patients, without being bogged down by the red tape and administrative friction. I handled their pay, I handled leave, performance evaluations, credentialing, troubleshooting our electronic record system, writing and posting job announcements, interviewing new candidates that want to serve our country in a civilian role. Again, my job was to remove the friction in healthcare so that our medical providers could deliver the quality care to veterans like me and like many people that this room know and are related to. I loved my job, I believed in it. I used to park on the other side of the hospital intentionally, so every morning I could walk through the lobby and be reminded of who I'm there to serve. That was until February 13th at 7:30 at night. I received an email from Washington, D.C. It was from somebody I'd never met before. It said that my performance had failed to demonstrate that my continued employment was in the public interest and that I needed to return my government equipment in the morning. Again, this didn't come from my supervisor. It did not come from his supervisor. It did not come from the director of the hospital. It came from our chief human capital officer, Tracy Therrett. And I wasn't the only one. Thousands of probationary employees across the VA and federal agencies received the same email. We all had on our SF-50 official employment forms marked terminated for poor performance and conduct. Even people who had recently been promoted due to their exceptional performance received the same summary dismissal. One of my colleagues had worked her way up from a secretarial role to a supervisor position. Newly promoted, the wife of a disabled veteran was terminated for performance and conduct, the same email I got. No one at our facility had been consulted. There were no performance reviews conducted. This was not based on merit. It was a reduction in force that was designed as, that was disguised as poor performance to avoid the legal protections and due process that comes with a formal reduction in force. But when I got that email and I went to work the next day, I didn't turn in my computer and stop working. I kept working. I kept working because there had been no transition of authority. There was no transfer of duties. I had projects that I was still working on. I was actively working on. And if I were to walk away right then, our veterans would be in jeopardy. I stayed there until 5:30 at night, working making sure everything that I had was transferred over. It was communicated. There were passwords. There was access until finally my computer access was pulled at 5:30 p.m. after an entire day of working for free. Because, again, that's what we do as public servants. We don't care about the money. We care about the mission. And that's what I and any other federal worker in that situation would do. So being laid off is hard. I understand that. I've been laid off before in the private sector. All right, but what hurt most was the characterization of my service and my colleagues' service by this very same government that I and all other veterans were willing to die for. It's not how our government should treat people. This isn't the private sector. All right, the government doesn't belong to one party or one administration. It belongs to the American people, especially those who have served it and those who are supporting it with integrity. And when leadership lies on official documents to sidestep the laws and cut corners, it doesn't just cost people their jobs, but it erodes the integrity of our institutions. After the termination came the silence. We weren't told if we still had health insurance. Nobody told us if we didn't get another paycheck or when one would come. And they didn't tell us we'd be able to work for the federal government again with poor performance and conduct stamped on our records. We received no mental health support, no resources to cope with the trauma of being fired without cause. And that's not just a failure of leadership, that's negligence. Because keep in mind, 30% of federal employees are veterans. And veterans are 57% more likely to die by suicide. Now imagine dedicating your entire life to this country and then doing so in the civilian sector too, only to be falsely terminated and discarded, and then publicly villainized by our elected officials and media. The president called VA employees sadists, all right, and one of our elected officials, Lisa McClain, who represents my hometown of Romeo, Michigan, where I grew up, called our experiences manufactured sob stories. And they lied. They lied on our termination notices, and they're continuing to lie when they say that the upcoming reductions in force, the working conditions, are not going to degrade the quality of service for our veterans, for our Michigan veterans. And let's not pretend that this was a mistake or this is unintentional. This was by design. I like to name names in this because I want people to have accountability for what they say and what they do. For example, 2023, Russell Vaught, the current director of the Office of Management and Budget, stood at a podium at a Center for Renewing America and said, laughing, giggling, "We want them not to go to work. We want to put them in trauma." He was talking about federal servants, civil servants and federal employees, veterans, your neighbors, your family members. They wanted to paint us as the villains. They want to call us DC insiders, deep state actors. But again, we're not those people. We live in Michigan. We live in your neighborhoods. We want to keep your water clean, our veterans healthy. We want to make sure that people have housing that's affordable. And that's when I got to ask myself, what kind of patriot talks about traumatizing people who've dedicated their lives to public service? All right, who would say this about our veterans, people who are willing to die for this country? And it's not patriotism, it's cruelty. It's not leadership, it's bullying. And in the Marines, we're taught to stand up to bullies. We don't promote them. When I had to turn in my government laptop, our IT guy shook his head and he said, "Man, I'm sorry, I voted for this, but I didn't think it'd affect people like you." But we got to understand that the cruelty and destruction of these indiscriminate purges doesn't matter if you're a doctor, if you're an HR guy, if you've been there for a while, if you're recently promoted, or who you voted for, because we're all lumped in the same bag of parasites, of waste. It doesn't matter who you are. It hits everybody. And for those wondering, again, how this is going to affect people in Michigan, let's keep in mind, we have almost 600,000 veterans in our state. It's one of the highest veteran populations in the nation. They rely on our facilities in Ann Arbor, Detroit, our larger hospitals, but then our smaller rural outreach clinics like in Oscoda, Traverse City. And all these facilities and the people that use their services and need their services are going to be impacted by the upcoming reductions in force. These are real people. Their doctors are going to be forced to share cubicles, and their appointments are going to be delayed because high-performing staff are going to be driven out of these institutions because of micromanagement and fear. Because that's what's happening right now. Nothing about the past 4 months, though, has been precise or calculated. It's been move fast and break stuff, except the stuff that they're breaking, it's institutions. It's healthcare. These are our federal agencies, again, that employ almost 30,000 Michiganders. Prime example that we talked about was the back pay for the terminated federal employees. I think that's just an indication of the recklessness of these DOGE purges. No one's going to say that we can't improve our federal agencies. We should always strive to do that. It's the execution of it. Because had the DOGE team or our leaderships at the VA done a simple Control F in our handbook and labor laws, they would have realized that these summary terminations were illegal, would be challenged in court, and they cost you, me, all of our your constituents, like over $15 million in back pay for us to sit at home and do nothing. When all we wanted to do, I know for our VA employees, is go back to work. We wanted to help, we wanted to serve, but we had to sit at home. And that's not efficiency. And it's not just, our DOGE efficiency experts that, we should be like evaluating right now. It's our leadership. Because there are yes men and yes women at the top of all these agencies right now that allowed this to happen. If you want to drain the swamp, maybe we should start with the senior leadership that didn't have the moral courage to say no when something was in direct violation of our laws and agency policy. Like one of the most dangerous things, that I learned in the Marines is when somebody fails to accurately describe the battlefield, to impress their higher ups, to make it sound better than it actually is. Because when you falsely say the road has been cleared of IEDs or that you function checked your weapons, if it's not true, people die. And when you hide the true impact of terminating 15% of VA employees, veterans are going to die. The hostile work environment and uncertainty will continue to drive away talented professionals. Those same VA doctors that we're talking about right now, they're not just treating veterans, though. They also play a critical role in training 70% of medical professionals. All right. You may not be terminating these doctors directly, but by making their lives miserable, denying them the support and the resources that they deserve, again, you're sabotaging the pipeline of future healthcare providers. And it's not just going to be affected or felt today, but it's going to be felt for generations in Michigan's healthcare industry and our medical research. Like, if you want to know what's really happening at the VA, if you want to get an accurate description and understanding of what's happening right now, don't ask a political appointee. Go ask a VA nurse. Go ask a doctor, all right? Ask the University of Michigan medical school professor who splits time between U of M and the VA because they care. And ask them how they feel about having to share a cubicle in shifts because they're not to be trusted doing their telehealth appointments from their university office or at their home. All right, ask all these clinicians that are trying to discuss some of the most intimate details of a veteran's mental and physical health over the chatter of a call center that's more fit for tech support than a medical environment. Like, we're demoralizing the very people that keep this system running, and it's happening by design. It's a strategy, though. It's to drive out the best and brightest and make life absolutely miserable. We want to put them in trauma, remember? We're micromanaging physicians. We're undermining scientists. We're stripping away the autonomy and the ability for critical thought that drives the scientific process. Because it's the competent, principled public servants who are most likely to speak up when something's wrong. And those are the exact people that we need. If we continue down this path, stretching VA medical staff thin, privatizing research, turning every veteran to just a billing code, we'll lose what makes the VA one of the most trusted healthcare systems in the country. The VA consists of medical professionals who are trained specifically to treat the unique issues that veterans deal with: post-traumatic stress syndrome, traumatic brain injury, toxic burn pit exposure. All right. Unfortunately, private healthcare professionals are not always held to the same standard. It's just not their specialty the majority of the time. And when a doctor treats a patient at the VA, they're focused on the patient, not the copay. All right? They don't have to limit the anesthesia to 90 minutes because that's when it stops being profitable. We can't run this like a business. This isn't a business. This is a service. But we're driving away these talented professionals, and unfortunately, it seems like that's the point. Because, the dream for our leadership seems to be fully privatized VA, where veterans are no longer heroes, they're just customers, where their health is just another business opportunity. And I and most veterans did not serve this country to watch our brothers and sisters be sold out for profit. These consequences are not theoretical. Not from me. My friends, Marines I served with, people in this room get their medical care at the Ann Arbor VA. And I cannot in honesty look them in the eyes and say that the changes that are coming, that are down the pike, are not going to degrade the quality of service that they get. And we owe them to be honest and give them an accurate appraisal of what the situation is and what the future is. And, you know, I ask you and I ask everybody, if you've ever like slapped a "We Support the Troops" bumper sticker on your car or set it like on the campaign trail, you know, I ask you to continue supporting the troops. It's not just a slogan. It's not just during campaign season. It's something that we need when it's not easy. All right, there are people that are willing to stand up for you, stand up for us, and what we'd like you to do is stand up for them. You know, it's ask the right questions to the experts, to the specialists. Avoid the media sound bites and get to the science. And that's what I'd ask is make sure that we don't make their quality of life so miserable that the VA doesn't exist anymore and we protect our Michigan veterans. Sorry if that was super long, but yeah.
Mr. Lennox, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your public service, military and civilian, and appreciate you being willing to come here and talk about your experience and what you're seeing. Members, do you have questions? Senator Camilleri?
Again, just echoing those comments, thank you for all the service you've given to this country in defending our freedoms, but also working on behalf of our veterans who are here. You know, one of the things that you highlighted that I think is just really important to continue to hammer home, cruelty is the point from this federal administration. That's what they're doing. They're making it harder on everyday Americans who work for our government, like yourself, like the others who testified, all in service of giving a tax cut to billionaires. These cuts don't make any sense. There's no logic behind them. We've heard that testimony today. The cruelty is the point. And that is something that we have to continue to fight back on. We will keep doing that. There are Republican legislators in this Capitol who want to bring DOGE to Michigan, right? Under no circumstances will we allow something like that to happen, because it's not about finding and saving taxpayer money. It's about harming institutions and public services. Again, all in the aim of privatizing everything, to give corporations and billionaires more money in their pocket and less in yours. So thank you for lifting that up, because it gives us the ability to push back when these things come to the Capitol, and it gives us that opportunity to tell your story and tell all of your stories, and continue to do so as we're engaging in these budget negotiations.
Thank you.
Senator Albert, then Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for your testimony today. Thank you for your previous service. So just a quick question. You had mentioned earlier in your testimony, I thought you said you were reinstated. Is that accurate? And if so, could you maybe explain that a little bit as well?
Yeah, that is correct, Senator. I was reinstated. It was, again, after multiple federal court cases challenged that this was illegal. And then I was put on administrative leave after, I think it was about a month, a month after the day, I was told I can be reinstated, but I can't come back to work. So we were sitting at home, receiving pay, doing nothing. And then a week after that, I was told I can come back into the office. And I am currently working. I'm doing everything that I can to try and help this hospital run to adjust to all these new changes. So I am working now. There are planned reductions in force, and I'm crossing my fingers and taking it one day at a time.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say again, I'm going to join my colleagues in just thanking you for your service, and thank you for coming up here. I was mad when I heard about the cuts. I'm getting increasingly mad as I hear about the stories affecting Michigan, and I am even more mad hearing about just all of these stories today. And I just want to let you know that you have someone in your corner, and we will fight, and we will make sure that, at least myself, that we have some supports coming out of Michigan for yourself and others that are experiencing this uncertainty. We need to be able to at least, I even wrote that down, to describe what the battlefield looks like for people in order to figure out how we're going to come out of this together. So I just want to say thank you, and I think it starts here, sharing your story, and then it's holding us accountable. So appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'd just like to reiterate the request to, talk to the people on the ground, please. That's all if you don't want to listen to me, that's fine. but listen to our clinicians, listen to the people that are there. Don't listen to somebody that's in from DC. Don't listen to a political appointee. Listen to the stakeholders on the ground of their feelings on what's happening and what they anticipate coming, because the only person that they really answer to are the veterans, because that's all they care about. All right, they're not worried about being a part of another administration or necessarily promotion. They know these institutions the best, and those are the people we should bring forward. They have great insights on this. They're experts, and they've been doing this for a really long time, and they choose to be at the VA. And I just ask you, talk to the experts on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Lennox. Thank you to everybody who came to speak today. And I'll just reiterate, public service, it's a noble profession. Helping your fellow man is a noble thing to do. So thank you all. There being no further business before the Committee on Labor, it is adjourned. Oh, wait, before I bang that gavel. We do have to approve the minutes. We held off on that. So I'll accept a motion from Senator Camilleri to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. There being no objection, the minutes are approved. And there being no objection, the committee is now adjourned.